Hi everyone, and welcome back to Season 8 of the Propcast. I'm Louisa Dickens, your host of the Propcast and co-founder of LMRE, the global PropTech recruitment and search consultancy. The aim of each episode is to introduce you to a PropTech innovator and discuss how their work has created a shift in focus when it comes to digitalizing the built environment. If you're interested in finding out more about PropTech or applying for a job in this space, or keen to know who the big players are that are moving and shaking the real estate industry, we have you covered. And we'll be bringing you an episode each week to connect you to the VCs, PropTech startups, and real estate professionals from around the globe. Today on the podcast, we will be learning what effect the growing solar industry can have on the built environment. And who better to speak to about this than co-founders of Aurora Solar, Chris Hopper and Samuel Adeyemo. So welcome to the show, Chris and Sam.
Thank you for having us, Louisa. I'm excited to be in the podcast.
Absolutely delighted to be here.
Now, for those listening, Aurora Solar is the #1 solar software to design and sell advanced PV systems. And as I was just saying to both of them, I'm delighted to have them on. Started speaking to Chris a couple of years ago or something like that. And since then, my God, Aurora Solar has been pretty busy. Since then, they've completed their Series C raise, which was just a small 250 million. They've also designed over 7 million solar projects. I think I'm accurate in that, but I'm sure they could correct me later. And also having named Rising Star Company by S&P Global Plat, along with many other awards. In this podcast, we're going to be hearing from both of them about their journeys to the renewable industry, how they came to founding and meeting each other and scaling Aurora Solar. We'll also learn the effect it have on helping with climate change and sort of mitigating it. We'll also find out what trends they've seen in terms of adoption, what really stimulates a customer to use their software, how they plan on taking the 2% of US power infrastructure from solar to hopefully 20% or more in the years to come. But also, for those listening, we're all reading more about climate tech, and hopefully everyone read about all the new targets that came from COP26. And why do you really look at it as a career pathway? You want to have a career which makes an impact. So these two will sort of hopefully share with us why they love working in this space. I guess different pathways to look into. So look, let's start with the show. And Chris, why don't you start us off with, how you came to founding this? I know you spent a bit of time at Imperial College in my hometown in London. You've obviously been involved in other sustainable solutions. Talk us through your sort of journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that's maybe a good place to start, because at least my part of the story starts in London. I'm not from there originally. I'm originally from Germany, but came to London to do my undergrad in electrical engineering at Imperial College. And during that time, me and a couple of my friends, we came across this huge issue of rural electrification. And we basically learned that there's more than 1 billion people worldwide without access to electricity. And having grown up in relative privilege, where you just get up and you flip the switch and light goes on, it was a pretty staggering fact that 1/6, 1/7 of the world's population doesn't have that sort of access to energy. Basically, we started a nonprofit organization that developed off-grid electrification solutions for developing countries. We did most of our work in Rwanda, and we electrified about 600 homes over the course of a couple of years, and mostly through solar power. So our solution was basically a solar-powered battery charging station for small villages in remote areas. And then we also transitioned to pay-as-you-go solar, which in the 10 years or so since has also been a big trend and a big success. And so that was my personal background before I came to California. I got the chance to come to Stanford Business School for my MBA, and that's where I met Sam. And the two of us, we met early on in the program, just became friends, met socially, and then started talking about what we might do after business school. And we quickly figured out that both of us had a shared passion for entrepreneurship. We both loved the idea of starting a business, doing our own thing, building something from scratch. And we started exploring different ideas. And one of the ideas that came up based on my experience in Rwanda was that of starting a solar installation business focused on emerging markets. The simple calculus was energy is it's a huge market. It's oftentimes an issue in emerging markets where energy can be very expensive. People run diesel generators oftentimes because the grid can be unreliable, but there's a lot of sun. So, hey, solar should make sense. And so that was the insight we had. And basically we put together a pilot project during our time in business school. So we met after class in the library, designed a system remotely, right, from our dorm rooms. We sourced suppliers, we hired local engineers, we raised a loan to finance the system. And then during our summer, between the 2 years of business school, basically as an internship, if you will, we flew to Kenya where we did our first project and installed the system. That was our first business, I guess, we started, which isn't what we do now, but is the precursor to it. And basically what started happening is as the project was a big success, it was a quintessential solar success story. No more power cuts. It was back up with the batteries put in place, clean energy from the panels, and the school, this was a project for a boarding school in Nairobi. The school saved on their bill every month. And so other people started reaching out to us and saying, hey, the solar makes sense for me. I heard about this project. I also want to have clean energy and save on my bill. And how much would it cost? And how much would I save? And so forth. And we're like, we don't know. It's a good question. It's an important question, but it's sort of the central question of solar. You need to answer this question every time for every project over and over again. And we realized we didn't have a scalable process of answering these sort of questions. And if we wanted to scale this business, we knew we needed to be able to do this at scale and in a data-driven manner. And so that was the insight that led to what Aurora is today, because we started building software for ourselves and then figured out, you know what, this is a big problem for the industry. Something like this needs to exist in the industry to bring about this transition towards a future that's powered by renewable energy. In early 2013, we shifted gears from the installation business to basically a software company. And that's all we do today is we make software for solar companies that helps the solar companies scale the business, design better solar and cheaper solar ultimately that results in more and more adoption of solar.
Thank you for that explanation. Now, for a lot of the audience, like I previously said, they need to know a little bit more. What are sort of the major ESG components? How does, I guess, solar help in terms of slowing down the climate crisis? Sam, as you are the main salesman of this product, can you talk us through a little bit more about what the product is and how the ESG components can sort into the real estate sector as well?
Yes, absolutely. So with regards to what does the product do, and after that translating or transitioning into what the ESG component is, it's helpful to get a little bit of background and a little bit of understanding of what a typical solar installation process looks like. For the purposes of this example, I'll be focusing on a residential solar installation, meaning that this is something that would go on someone's home, someone's property. And the idea is that you want to have a solution that lowers your electricity bill because you're getting your energy from the sun. And of course, the equipment that translates that energy into electricity you can use in your home. You want to do something good for the environment. Ideally, obviously, solar is renewable energy. You're not burning fossil fuels. You're not causing emissions. And ultimately, you want to have control over your energy. This isn't a theme that we thought of or have actually actively been thinking about, but especially in a number of sectors, if we move to more decentralization, I can't think of anything that's much more decentralized than being able to control and own your own energy source. So with that background, what exactly does Aurora do? This whole process of getting this equipment, this hardware, all of these various components from solar panels to inverters to even the railing on how these solar panels were placed on your roof and all of the various electrical components, someone has to design that system. And historically, the way they would design that system in the most extreme case is to travel to your property, to take measurements of your property, look at what we call them irradiance, but sunlight characteristics are in that location, and use that to be able to forecast based on a specific solar configuration, how many solar panels can fit on that property, how much energy will they produce, and how much money will it save you. This is a process that Chris just described in a form that spares all the gory details that the two of us went through when we were designing the solar installation for halfway across the world. I mean, we were in our dorm rooms nights and weekends, and we found people who would go and take these measurements for us and send us back the data so we can design a solar installation. So ultimately, what Aurora does is it takes all of those processes, those manual processes, and turns them into very easy digital processes so that you can get the same outcome of figuring out how many solar panels will fit on the property, how much energy they'll produce, and how much money will save you. So something that may have taken half a day can now be done in a few minutes. And in many ways, it's much better and much more accurate than traveling to the site. Just touching very quickly on the second part of the question of ESG, by its nature, the product is ESG. Environmental, absolutely sustainable. These are things that are extremely important for anyone who's looking at this. But within Aurora itself, if you can help people avoid what we call a truck roll, actually traveling to the site to design the solar installation, if you can allow them to do 10 times as much work at lower cost, these are things that can be passed on to the consumer. Directly, that means that more solar will be installed, which again reduces things such as pollution, carbon emissions. And indirectly, it also means that there is less traveling back and forth,
Yeah.
which just makes for a more efficient and more sustainable process overall.
Yeah. I read in another article, you said the beauty of your product is remote installation, not having to site visit.
Hey, this is Michael Beckerman from PropTech. I'm here to invite you to check out PropTech Plus, the first streaming platform devoted to innovation and technology in the built world, featuring new weekly videos from the world's leading real estate and tech professionals. The first month of streaming is absolutely free, and then you could use the code LMRE to receive 25% off your second month. To learn more, visit plus.cretech.com.
I guess some people who are maybe not as progressive when it comes down to technology, it's one of your challenges. Some customers wanting a bit more sort of in-person interaction. I presume your business, is that something you've maybe come into with the real estate industry who are slightly slower to adopt these changing sort of softwares?
I can take a stab at answering that question, assuming it was addressed to me. I would focusing on people who are deeply within the solar industry. When we first started out, there was skepticism as to, are you telling me that what I can do remotely from my computer would be as good, if not better, than traveling to the site and really kicking the tires, per se? And that was a challenge at first, but the technology has proven itself out. We had to get validations from the Department of Energy. We got validations from various state governments, and people started to see the results themselves. So that's a battle that's largely won. It's similar to people who I think 10, maybe even 20 years ago would say, you can't buy a car online without actually driving it. But now everyone's doing it. And it's only because the answer is yes, you can. So I think that by and large, that is increasingly the minority because the benefits so far outweigh any sort of challenges associated with not being there in person. As far as the real estate sector, I think that the biggest challenge there has just been understanding, like really knowing so I get conceptually that solar is good for us. It's good for the world, everything else. But how do we participate in this? I get it. So now what do we do? And for those that figure that there is a really good opportunity for them, in addition to bolstering their ESG credentials and doing their part to fight climate change, it can be lucrative if structured the right way.
I guess this year, 2022, is a year where everyone can't be sort of fluffing about. We now have actual targets they got to hit and not just be talking about it. And I guess proof's in the pudding. I think, am I right in saying you've designed over 7 million solar projects? Is that number accurate? Maybe, Chris, you might know a more up-to-date number than I do.
The one tweak is that we don't actually design systems, at least not anymore. That's sort of where we came from. But now all we do is we make software and we help our clients design systems. So don't want to take credit for all those designs because that's our clients doing the work in the field, which is an important distinction. We're behind the scenes. We make the software that allows them to analyze the sites. Basically, there's multiple steps in there, understanding the energy consumption of the home. So we help with that, creating a 3D model of the building. And that's also something the software does. We do a shade analysis based on that and different data sources such as LiDAR. We allow them to do automatic system design and then forecast energy production savings and ultimately different ways of financing the systems. That's the end-to-end process in a nutshell with much more nuance than I just described, but that's basically happened 7 million times and happens, I think, currently to the tune of 60,000 projects a week, where a project is a unique address. It's basically a building that is being analyzed for solar.
Right. This also ties in quite nicely to what I wanted to talk to you about, and you can maybe share with us a bit more sort of trends and data you've seen, obviously, other than your customers going up. There's obviously been a lot more we've seen in the news, especially in the US, more sort of storms, which causes more sort of power cuts. And do you think the everyday man and women, obviously you spoke about residential, is now saying, oh God, and turning to solar as a way of, I guess, getting sort of electricity? But what sort of major trends have you seen from your software in terms of customers? Yeah.
100%. I'll give you just one statistic. Last year, at some point, I've actually lost track of what we named some of these various storms, but there was this pretty extraordinary snowstorm that hit Texas. a place that isn't subject to extremely cold weather, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the consequences of that snowstorm was that power was cut for several days at a time. And what we saw during that time was in our software, Texas had the highest per capita number of solar designs created. And this was amazing for us because historically that would certainly not be the case. It was always California, other regions like that. And a lot of that was driven by people seeing a problem and trying to address their problem by saying, I need to have some more independence. I need to have some more reliability. What are my options? I could go out and get a diesel generator, or maybe I can look at solar, for example. And that really piqued a lot of people's curiosity. And we saw that absolutely translate and manifest itself in terms of actual requests and quotes and designs. And there's always a lag before you see the actual installation because it takes some time to do the installation. But I'm pretty sure the data will reflect that as well. So unfortunately, when they are natural disasters, it's almost a poignant reminder to people that A, we need to do something about it. And B, if you're concerned about reliability and independence, solar is something that you should seriously consider.
Thank you for that. I was doing some research the other day. Can you believe it that some of the biggest companies in the world didn't exist 30 years ago, the likes of Facebook and Uber? On the other hand, real estate is a total juxtaposition, being the oldest asset class in the world. We often hear about the property industry being a slow mover, and the need for PropTech is clear to improve solutions and take advantage of the data being gathered. We saw 21 billion in investment into PropTech in 2020, and it was predicted a further increase of 25% in 2021, which has already been surpassed, which means there'll be plenty to talk about when it comes to the innovation of the built environment. EY reported that 53% of real estate owners think that they don't have the in-house talent to adopt technology successfully. Without technology-minded talent and leadership, the implementation and widespread adoption of your product might be proving tricky. If that is the case, we are here to help. So head to our website, lmre.tech, and we can find the right talent for your company's needs. Going on to, I guess it's the new year. We're all talking about New Year's resolutions, what we want to focus on, all of that jazz. I was thinking about LMRE as a business, what we want to focus on. Obviously, we want to partner with technologies which are going to grow. And the ones we've seen most investment in is obviously climate tech and Contech. I mean, you guys recently, congratulations, received, I think it's 250 million Series C investment. Now, there's plenty of people following that trend. I think Fifth Wall, who was an early stage investor of you guys, and obviously Michael Beckerman does climate tech, is focusing on this too. Sam, you mentioned about the educational piece. Can you educate our audience about what is so great? What are the career opportunities in working in this space? And then Chris, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I guess let me kick it off. And I know Sam has thoughts on the question as well, because it's a shared passion that we have. I personally feel very privileged to be able to work in this space. It's a super interesting space in a very interesting time, and it's a space that matters. And that's a pretty rare combination. I get to do the work I love doing, which is building a business, building product, working with talented people, working on interesting challenges in a way that really can make a difference. And that's huge. Energy is undergoing such a huge transition right now. It's a massive industry that's historically been not very fast moving. But now the last decade or so, we've seen the early stages of this massive shift from large, centralized fossil fuel nuclear-based generation towards distributed renewables that are much more dynamic. And so that's a really interesting trend to be sitting on, and with a lot of challenges, right? It's not easy to make that transition, especially at scale. How do we shift this massive industry that has a huge carbon footprint to boot? How do we shift that to this future we want to bring about, which is that future that's powered by renewable energy? And so there's many problems within that. And we're not solving all of them, but we're solving a big one, which is within solar. How can we deploy distributed solar, meaning mostly rooftop, smaller scale solar at scale? That's a really difficult problem to do because there's so many questions that need to be answered in the process. We need to be cost efficient in designing and deploying these systems, data driven in the way we qualify and then also make these projects and then make design decisions. So there's a lot that software can actually do to bring down the cost of solar, which ultimately would drive adoption. That's what gets me excited, is a confluence of these different things. And I know that brings a lot of talented folks to Aurora as well. Folks could work anywhere. There's no shortage of jobs in tech and exciting things going on and big problems to be solved. But this is one that really resonates and matters to the folks who come work for us. And so it's wonderful also to work in a place where everyone shares that.
Well, you're all having an impact, aren't you? I think, Sam, you touched upon that before we hopped on the podcast. Sam, what would you say is you sort of love about working in this space for our audience?
Yeah, I would say that what is there that's not to love? The work is meaningful. The product is interesting. They're worthwhile challenges to solve. And ultimately, the value of what you're selling is clear with some explanation. So if you are in product and engineering, this is something that you absolutely want to be involved in building. If you're in sales, marketing, this is something that you want to be involved in promoting and selling. If you're in customer support, customer success, any sort of challenges or obstacles people are coming across, you want to help them resolve it so they can go out there and be doing good work that is so important for society. So in some ways, the fact that it's future focused, right? You're not looking at technology that was yesterday's technology. You're working on the cutting edge of things, and you actually can make a good living doing it is just really exciting. So I think it combines all the elements. Being on the right side of history is always something that's been pretty important to me. I would say that if there's one thing in your career that you want to be focused on, you want to be on the right side of a big trend. And, getting one that is meaningful to you, as Chris said, is a privilege. In fact, I think I used those words before we even started the podcast. I literally used the same word. I feel privileged. Ultimately, just to recap again, the product is very interesting. It's meaningful at the end of the day. It's future focused. And all of those combine to mean that it is something that will be lucrative on a personal and even a pecuniary basis.
Awesome. It's so nice to speak to people so passionate about what you do. I know it's your business, but after doing some research over the weekend, I never thought I'd be so interested in sort of solar panels. For those new to LMRE, we're a global recruitment and search consultancy focusing on placing the best talent into the PropTech and real estate industry. We're extremely fortunate to work alongside the best VCs in the ecosystem to help scale their portfolios and their own teams. We've even had a couple of them on the podcast, such as Metaprop and Fifth Wall, who joined me back in season 1. We've recently started a campaign on our YouTube channel spotlighting a number of VCs from around the globe to take the opportunity to spotlight their business, portfolios, and gain advice from the inside for those looking to access the VC world from both capital and talent perspective. So, are you looking for funding for your own business or interested in the VC landscape? How do they handpick their cohorts? Or if you're just a curious mind that wants to learn more, check it out. Head to LMRE on YouTube, or you can find their interviews on our website. Now on with the show. Now we're coming to the final part of the podcast. Chris and Sam, how we finish off, it's the LMRE part. So I always touch on a main lesson you've learned. M is mention anyone or someone as shout out. It could be one of your clients. We've yet to gone into some of your major clients. That would be great to sort of hear. R is what's been the most rewarding part. I mean, you guys just mentioned it. And what are you most excited about in the future of this space? Hopefully taking 2% to 80%, like we spoke about earlier. Chris, would you like to start us off with the main lesson you've learned throughout your career? And I can talk you through the next ones following that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that I learned along the way. But one big one is something I think that's not as appreciated, especially in this day and age. But I think there's a big place for just serendipity in life and also in one's career. So when people ask me, oh, what should I do? How should I break into this or that? Or how do I start a company? I always say, just follow your interests. If I told you a little bit of the story of how my personal story connected to what we do now, and I can tell that as a linear story that makes total sense. But I also remember back then, I didn't know where the path would lead. I just took one step at a time and followed my interest. And I had the same questions about my future, what I might do and how I might find my place. And it's just following my interest and then seeking out other people who do the same and who are talented and interested. Found a great partner in Sam, but also many other people along the way. And so I think just taking that approach, I think will lead to interesting things. Probably not the life you planned or envisioned, but and I didn't, but an interesting one nonetheless.
That's pretty exciting. Now, you obviously mentioned Sam in that question. Is there any other person or client you want to give a quick shout out to?
Yeah. There's also many folks who supported us along the way. For example, there's a gentleman at Stanford, Brian Bartholomeusz, who's the director of the Tomcat Center, probably the very earliest supporter of ours, without whom we wouldn't be there. Other investors of ours like Energize Ventures, big believers of ours, and also very focused on this space, folks who share the same interest and urgency also for the problems we solve. And there's so many more. All the early employees who trusted us, but who could have taken the jobs at Google at higher salaries and so forth and more security, but they believed in us and the mission. So huge thank you to everyone who believed in us and shared our journey.
Thanks for that, Chris. And what has been the most rewarding part of working in this space?
Yeah, it's really being able to have an impact. That's the single biggest thing. It's a huge problem that we face. And not just we as a company or the industry, but as a society. How do we transition to a world that's powered by renewable energy? And that's a massive problem that requires big solutions. And so it's a privilege. And it's where I get my energy from, is being able to focus day to day on.
And 2022, you guys obviously are going to be scaling. You're going to be doing all sorts of things, no doubt working on some software for few more million projects, who knows? You obviously mentioned about 60,000 a day or something. What are you most excited about for this year?
Oh, there's a lot, because the number of problems that need to be solved to get there to that future that I described is long. We are looking forward to scaling further. We're currently about 270 Aurorans, but we're looking to basically double that. So we're ahead of a big year. These problems need solutions, and who creates solutions is smart, talented people. And so that's my big focus, is bringing in new talent. So if anyone is listening and is interested in helping us solve these problems and bring about that future that I described, would love to hear from you. There's many more pieces of technologies that we're bringing to market. For example, we have a new set of AI powered products that are just coming out, where we bring machine learning to solar, help basically automate the solar design process to make faster and more data-driven design decisions. So that's something I'm terribly excited about, because it can further help us bring down the cost of solar by leveraging cutting-edge technology.
Thank you very much for that, Chris. Now, Sam, talk us through the LMRE parts. What's the main lessons you've learned throughout your career?
I would say one of the lessons, maybe not the only one, but one of the lessons that I've learned being on this journey over the past 10 years or so is it's really important that once you decide you're going to do something, that you don't have a plan B. Basically, you need to go for broke. The margin between success and failure is so fine that if you're distracted in any shape, way, or form, the difference between being a big success and being maybe not an abject failure, but something that is not noteworthy or not meaningful is pretty large. And in both cases, you had spent the same amount of time. So I think having no plan B, putting all your cards on plan A, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, you move on. You don't want to hedge too much, because if you do that, I think you dilute your efforts, and dilution of effort, even 1 or 2%, actually has a much bigger magnitude in the end outcome. So one lesson for me has been no plan B, all in, believe in the mission, believe in the vision, believe in the strategy, and go execute. As far as mentioning folks, I would say that obviously Chris, my co-founder, we've been on this journey for a decade plus, and there's so many people that we could thank. And I hope there'll continue to be many, many people that we thank, because we're just getting started. But I would just specifically call out other people who joined us very early on, or right at the beginning, and may not have the privilege of being invited to a podcast and, speaking with yourself and the rest of your organization, but they've really been absolute warriors. So we have some engineers who've been with us since the early days of the company. They know who they are. I won't mention all of them by name, but I think they deserve a lot of additional credit, because we are in an environment, in a society where people constantly shift around. Nothing wrong with that. But there's something really commendable about saying that this is what I want to do and I want to see it through. And it's been really exciting that you could repay their faith, because in those early days, it was just belief. There was no office, hardly any funding, and no product for sure. Maybe I should mention a few people by name. So that would include Messiker, Matt, Michael Clocker, some of those folks who've been with us since the very early days and are still around till today. They've been fantastic. We have about 300 people in the organization now. By mentioning 3, it almost seems like I'm excluding 297. They are part of today and Aurora's ongoing story. So I also want to give a shout out to them, because if there's one thing that I think Chris and I have done It's being able to attract lots of talent to a space that really needed it, and very privileged to work with.
Awesome.
In the spirit of attracting talent, it wouldn't be possible without capital. So special thank you to Fifth Wall as well. Fifth Wall is particularly exciting because now there is a climate fund and everything else. But in the early days, it was part of PropTech. And that took a lot of vision and a lot of conviction to actually switch over and make an investment in Aurora. And that was a few years ago, and it's just been great. And they've been phenomenal partners to work with, and very excited to continue the journey with them. And I hope that there'll be more crossover investors who start to see this as not only a problem that needs to be solved, but an opportunity to do well from both a financial standpoint and from an impact standpoint.
Agreed. Yeah, we're seeing the likes of, say, over here into the euro at like 2150, doing some serious investment and raising a huge amount of capital. But yeah, no, agreed. Fifth Wall and their client fund, Brendan and Brad, are doing great things. And I think Greg as well, who joined them about a year and a bit ago, is also pushing forward with it. So excited to see future investments they've done as well, and their involvement in the climate tech space. Chris and Sam, it's been a bloody pleasure having you on the Propcast. Thank you for sharing your insights into this space and explaining us all about the solar sector as well. Congratulations yet again on all your growth, and really looking forward to following your future growth over 2022 and what's to come. But thank you so much, and I'll catch up with you after the show. Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our guests and our sponsors, Cretech and Reentech. Make sure you visit our website, lmre.tech, where you can subscribe to our newsletter, keep up our industry news and events, or if you're looking for your next career move, it's all on there. The Propcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, where all good content is found. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate it if you could spread the word and tell a friend about it, or even write us a review. And I'll catch you next week.
Making high-quality podcasts like this takes a lot of work. That's a fact. But not when you hire Copus. With our white glove experience, we handle everything for you, from guest outreach all the way through publishing and promotion. We handle it all. You show up to hold great interviews like these and build relationships with your guests. We take care of everything else. Podcasting is not just about the audience. Every podcast interview is the start of a brand new relationship. With a weekly podcast, you would build relationships with 52 ideal partners or prospects through podcast interviews over the next 12 months. Do you believe 52 new relationships could grow your business? We do. Why not contact me today, jason@copus.com, JASON@KOPUS.com, and let's talk.